back in. Today, we're going to be discussing 7 players you definitely need to be drafting in your upcoming fantasy drafts. Crazy that we're only about a month and a half away from training camp. So let's go ahead and get started and jump right in. We're going to start with a quarterback. Now, I went back and forth on who I wanted to use here because there's actually a pretty decent amount of later round quarterbacks, really starting around 8, 9 and on, that I really wouldn't mind drafting this year, which in years past, the late round quarterback approach really kind of dry up a little bit because the fantasy community has gotten so smart. But this year, I really do like some of the quarterbacks like Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, who are going at the back half of the 9th, early 10th round, Trevor Lawrence, Drake May. I think you can make an argument for a lot of these guys. But the player I'm going to talk about today is a player that I actually have ranked right now as a top 12 quarterback this year, and that is J.J. McCarthy from the Minnesota Vikings. I think it's kind of egregious that his current ADP right now at FFPC is QB 19, and Fantasy Pros has him ranked about QB 22. And we've seen this system be able to resurrect a player like Sam Darnell. Darnell last season was the QB 9 in fantasy points per game, throwing for 4,300 yards and 35 touchdowns. Darnell previously was never better than 15 fantasy points per game or QB 24 in a season. Looking back at McCarthy, though, at Michigan in 2023, he completed 72% of his passes. He was also 5th in catchable throw rate in 2023. Now, the other thing I like about him is something that doesn't get talked about enough about him, and that is his upside as a runner. This is a player that had nearly a 4.4 40 at the combine. He also boasted 90th percentile agility. I don't know if he does that year one coming off the injury that he's coming off of, but maybe over the second half of the season we see him. But he definitely has that in his bag. Like, he can definitely get out of the pocket and pick up yards on the ground, despite never topping 300 yards rushing at Michigan. So I definitely think the ability is certainly there, and that is certainly something we look for, in quarterbacks that we definitely want to try to get. He's not just a traditional pocket passer. I think there's a lot more there to his game. So, and also, he's landing in one of the best situations you can be in, right? I mean, that's what we liked about him last year was Kevin O'Connell. I mean, this system produces fantasy-friendly outcomes for quarterbacks. And then you factor in all the talent that's there with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. I just think it's going to be really hard for him not to at least be a top 15 quarterback this year. And so I love J.J. McCarthy. Let's move over to the running back position. I got a couple guys I want to hit on. First one's going to be a player, and that is Kenneth Walker. He is currently being drafted at RB17 or late 4th round right now. Now, last year in 11 games, he was actually a top 12 producer on a per-game basis, averaging 16.5 fantasy points per game. He handled about 72% of the opportunities, 14.9 carries, and 4.8 targets per game. Now, the targets per game was something we really love to see because he was actually 4th in target share and 5th in route participation. So despite only playing in 11 games, it really boosted up his numbers last year because he was so involved in the passing game. I don't really see that changing this year. He was also efficient on the ground. He was top 12 in yards created per touch, evaded tackles, and juke rate last year. Now, what I like about him so much is actually their new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, coming over from New Orleans, runs a scheme that is going to be very well suited for Kenneth Walker. He runs a predominantly outside zone scheme. Alvin Kamara last year was top 5 in outside zone runs. And I think this sets up really well for Kenneth Walker, who nearly averaged 5 yards per carry on outside zones. And Zach Charbonnet is actually pretty poor at this, only averaging 3.4 yards per carry on outside zone runs in his career. So I really like Kenneth Walker. This sets up really well for him. Outside zones typically really highlight, especially your home run hitting running backs, and that is exactly what Kenneth Walker is. I'm going to have no problem taking him where he's at. I know injuries is always a concern. We can say that about most running backs. I'm still all aboard the Kenneth Walker train. Now, next up, I really was going to talk about Chase Brown, but everybody's talking about Chase Brown, and his ADP over at FFPC, which is basically high-stakes fantasy leagues, his ADP has already risen. He was about going around RB 13, 14. Now he's all the way up to RB 10. Like, I think he's going to continue to rise. Then when we get to August, he's definitely be going as a top 10 running back. I still think he's a must-draft player as long as he doesn't get too high. But the running back that I really wanted to hit on was Quinshon Judkins, rookie running back. Now, when you look at all the rookie running backs this year, this is obviously a tremendous rookie running back class. Ashton Genty is going to be a first-round pick. He deserves to be landed in a great spot. But honestly, I think Judkins landed in one of the best spots you could get because he, too, is going to be entering a situation where there's nobody else there. I mean, it's Jerome Ford. They drafted Dylan Sampson in the 4th round. But Judkins sets up to be a running back that's going to get all of the early down work, get the goal line work. We'll see how much he's involved in the passing game. But even if his situation is like Nick Chubb, where he gets the early down work, the goal line work, the short yardage work, then I definitely think this is a very good pick, considering he's being drafted at RB28 or in the middle of the 7th round right now. This is a very productive running back. Spent his first 2 years at Ole Miss, averaging about 120 yards per game. He then transferred to Ohio State in his final season. He split touches with Travion Henderson, who is now in New England. He's going to be splitting touches with Ramondre Stevenson, but he still finished last year, his junior year, with 1,060 rushing yards and 161 receiving yards and 16 total touchdowns. He is quick. He's explosive. He's not the best pass blocker right now, but he's definitely a willing pass blocker. But that's always something that rookie running backs struggle with in college because they're just not really asked to do it all that much. Definitely great contact balance, very special athlete, 92nd percentile speed score, 94th percentile burst score at 6 foot, 221 pounds is definitely what you're looking for. And that is why the Browns used the 4th pick in the 2nd round on him. But this is just a great situation for him. He really has no other competition that's going to take touches away. I do think, like I said, Jerome Ford could take away some pass catching work from him, but he's going to get all the early down work. And considering he's coming off the board as an RB3 right now, if he even maintains this or even goes a little bit higher, I'm perfectly okay with it. Because if you look at the other situations, Marion Hampton's going to be splitting touches with Najee Harris. Then you have RJ Harvey's another player a lot of people like, and I like a lot as well. He's going to be having to share some touches with J.K. Dobbins, who they just signed in Denver. So there's a lot of these situations where Judkins doesn't really have a whole lot in front of him to really stop him. So I love Judkins this year. I think he's definitely worth the pick. I think he's even if he were to move up a little bit, I'm perfectly okay with taking him there. I think he could finish as a top 15 running back this year. I don't think that's crazy. The offensive line, hopefully it can bounce back because it did have a down year, but they are still bringing back the core of Wyatt Teller, Joel Bitonio, Jack Conklin, and Ethan Posick. And they also brought in a new offensive line coach in Mike Bloomgren. We'll see how that works out with him, but there's a lot of positivity around there, and I think this offensive line could bounce back. And if that is, that's just another feather in his cap. So I really want to hit on him. Let's move over to the wide receivers. We're going to start with Jameson Williams. Coming off the board at wide receiver 29. I have him currently ranked at wide receiver 19. Last year, he had 1,000 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, average 14.2 fantasy points per game. Wide receiver 23 last year. He was 26th in yards per route run, 5th in yards per team pass. He was 5th in yards per target and 20th in yards per team pass attempt. He was also 19th in route win rate last year. Now, we do have a new offensive coordinator taking over here. John Morton takes over from Ben Johnson, who moved over to Chicago. But Morton's been around a while. He's coached under guys like Sean Payton and John Gruden. But he also spent time in Detroit in 2022 and helped design this offense in 2022. And so he has some familiarity with the weapons and the players that are already here. He's already said that he doesn't really want to change a ton of what they've been doing and what has worked for them. But there are going to be some different wrinkles that he's going to throw in. And so I think this all sets up really well for Jameson Williams, especially if they look to take a little bit more shots on him deep, because he is definitely somebody that could finish as a top 15 wide receiver this year. I definitely think some of the design touches are still going to be there, but I think we can see a little bit more deep shots here within this offense with John Morton. So I love Jameson Williams, and I don't really understand why he's coming off the board at wide receiver 29. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But I think there's a ton of upside here for Jameson Williams this year. Next up is going to be George Pickens for me. He moves over to Dallas, and look, in his career, he's never had a good quarterback to throw him. I mean, Russell Wilson was terrible last year, and then it was just a couple games with Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph, and it's just he just hasn't had an actual quarterback to throw him the ball. And Dak Prescott, for all the hate that he gets, he is by far the better quarterback that he's ever been with, and I think he really suits up well for what George Pickens does well, because last year he had 59 catches, 900 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns, 11.7 fantasy points per game, but he was 4th in deep targets, 15th in red zone targets, but he had a 67% catchable target rate, which was 71st among all wide receivers last year. He was still 14th in yards per reception and 28th in yards per route run. But like I said, he's a great fit with Dak Prescott, who has ranked 12th, 4th, 19th, 11th, and 3rd in deep ball completion percentage in his career, and should be plenty of volume to go around, as the Cowboys ranked 4th in pass plays per game. They don't really have a running game still. I don't think you're going to see them, even though Brian Schottenheimer traditionally has been more run heavy. I don't see that being the case, as he was the offensive coordinator with this team last year. And like I said, they finished 4th in pass attempts last year. And that was all obviously not all with Dak Prescott, who got hurt over the second half of the season. But I think this is a really solid bounce back spot here. Really solid wide receiver 2 for Dak Prescott. And there's more than enough volume to go around here. I think George Pickens can easily have 120, maybe 130 targets this year within this offense, and really, really pairs well for Dak Prescott, with CeeDee Lamb taking up some of the underneath stuff and into the slot, where you can have George Pickens run a lot of deep routes. So I really like George Pickens at current cost right now, at wide receiver 30 in FFPC. So we over to another wide receiver, my last one I want to talk about really quickly, but I don't really understand this. Darnell Mooney, why is he wide receiver 50 right now in FFPC? Last year, a 21% target share, almost 7 targets per game, 32% market share of the air yards. He was 10th in deep targets, Now we know for the most part that last year Kirk Cousins was absolutely dreadful. 65% catchable target rate, 78th among all wide receivers last year, but 64 receptions, nearly 1,000 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns, 12.1 fantasy points per game last year. And he also had a very strong 26% first read target share. And there's also reports now that Kyle Pitts may be moved. But I think year two with Michael Penix in this system and this offense, I think this is going to be a much better situation. And I really like Darnell Mooney with nothing else behind them here. And it's basically just him and Drake London. He finishes again as a wide receiver 3, but he's being drafted like a wide receiver 4, almost a wide receiver 5 at this point. I don't really get it. Darnell Mooney definitely should be going higher than this. I have him at wide receiver 36 right now in my rankings. And Darnell Mooney should easily smash his current ADP if it remains here. He will be an easy buy for me. Somebody you can easily plug in on bye weeks, or if an injury happens with your team. Love Darnell Mooney again this year. Don't understand the ADP. Let's finish up with Mark Andrews. Tight end 8. Like, I get it. He really struggled at the first part of the year last year, but he really turned it around. But finished with 673 receiving yards, 11 receiving touchdowns, 11.1 fantasy points per game. But he was at the top of every single metric you looked at. First in average depth of target, third in deep targets, 15th in red zone targets, 7th in yards per route run, 5th in yards per reception, 8th in yards per team pass attempt. Like, he was really good last year. Now for the first 5 weeks, yes, he was absolute cheeks. He was tight end 29. He scored a total of 22 fantasy points. But from that point on, tight end 4 for Mark Andrews. I don't understand why he's going off the board at tight end 8. Makes no sense to me. He should be going much higher than this. I have him as tight end 4. This offense is still largely the same as it was last year. Same weapons. They brought in DeAndre Hopkins. Other than that, it's basically the same team as it was last year. Same offensive coordinator, Todd Monken. We know Mark Andrews is the safety valve, especially once they get inside the red zone for Lamar Jackson. I think now he's another year removed from that injury that he suffered that typically takes most players quite a bit of time to come back from. A year removed from that, I think Mark Andrews is all the way back this year. Love Mark Andrews, the top 5 tight end. No reason he should be going to tight end 8 right now. That makes 0 sense to me. If he continues to go there, then I'm just going to be waiting on tight end and taking Mark Andrews in the 7th round. So that being said, let me know if I missed anybody. Let me know some players that you are definitely looking forward to drafting in your upcoming fantasy drafts. Training camp coming right around the corner. I'm excited. Let us know in the comment section below. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.